Hello and welcome. You are watching Business Plus here on News 9 Live. I am Krishnakumar. As India gears up for Union Budget 2024-25, anticipation is building over some major tax reforms. In specific, income tax reforms that is set to impact millions of salaried people in this country. Will Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman lighten the load for the middle class? Will the new tax regime dominate, or will the old tax regime persist? To put it even more simply, will there be any relief in terms of income tax for you, me, and all the others watching this broadcast? That's a big question we're asking on this edition of Business Plus. And joining me here in the studio is my friend and colleague Karthik Malhotra. We also have Sudin Sabnis, partner, direct tax, Laxmikumaran and Sridharan joining us. Thank you, Sudin, for being with us. And we also have Richa, Sawhney, Chartered Accountant, Walker, Chandiok Co Llp joining us. Thank you, Richa, for being with us. Let me begin by asking Karthik that question that everybody asks, every time we are up ahead, we have a budget, up ahead of us, and that is, will there be any cut in income tax? Let's be serious about this, Karthik, because, every single time we ask that question, and when the final income tax comes, there is actually nothing for the salaried class. But this time around, so many questions were asked of, who should be the new finance minister before Nirmala Sitharaman's name was announced, and what should the new finance minister do? Mainly because India is a consumption-driven economy. You want India to do well. You want Indians to go out there, open their wallets, spend money, and consume. And for that to happen, their income tax has to be low. They have to be more. They have to have more money in their hands to spend, isn't it?
So, Krishna, I think, it's a catch-22 situation for any finance minister. And, the fact that Nirmala Sitharaman has presented so many budgets already, and this is yet another budget which she's likely to present in the month of July. At one end, the GDP needs more consumption to happen. If there is more consumption, you have better growth. You have industry selling more and more goods and more services being consumed by the people. But at the same time, there is a fiscal deficit target as well for the finance minister. So, with a target of 5.1% of GDP as the fiscal deficit target for this financial year and going down to 4.5% next year, that means the government needs to earn more tax revenue and perhaps spend lesser than it has been spending to keep that fiscal deficit in target. But I don't want to bat for Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman just as yet. I want to actually bat for the middle class. So, the point is, the middle class has been subjected to very high taxes, and the fact that there is confusion between new tax regime, old tax regime, there are multiple chatters and talks in multiple forums right now on will Finance Minister actually give some relief to the middle class. Now, there are two ways to look at it. Number one, if you look at the old tax regime, and the idea of the government is to actually make citizens pivot from the old tax regime to the new tax regime, which is why the new tax regime is the default tax regime, right? But in the old tax regime, you have those beautiful deductions and exemptions, right? Section 80C, for example, the favorite of all taxpayers. So, there are talks that perhaps the 1,50,000 limit in the old tax regime may be upped to 2 lakh rupees this time around. I mean, remember, this is all just chatter right now. We don't have any independent confirmation of this. But if Finance Minister was to up that limit from 1,50,000 to 2 lakh rupees, then the incentive for people to stick to the old tax regime is higher.
Yeah.
But if the Finance Minister does major tweakings or even minor tweakings in the new tax regime, and the chatter there is that the threshold of nil tax could be raised from 3 lakh rupees to 5 lakh rupees. So, that becomes reason enough for a lot of tax-paying citizens who are under the 5 lakh rupee tax bracket right now to pivot to the new tax regime, because the net outgo for them is going to not make any difference. But broadly, if there is a widening of the tax net, and if there are more and more people who continue to file nil tax returns, and despite registering for the tax, that still means that you're widening the tax net. And if not this year, as their income increases, you can begin to tax them. So, we don't know which of these will happen. In the new tax regime, incidentally, Krishna, before you go to our other guest today, there is also chatter that maybe the 15 lakh rupees salary in the new tax regime, which is right now taxed at 30%, could see a revision as well. So maybe there could be one more slab added where 15 to 20 lakh could be taxed lesser than 30%, and the peak 30% tax kicks in only after 20 lakh rupees. But like I said, these are all speculations right now. The middle class wants it. The middle class has wanted it all this while. Will Finance Minister bite it this time for the middle class or not? We don't yet know.
Will Nirmala Sitharaman bite the bullet? Karthik, as you were speaking, I was seeing the number of taxpayers over there. Highest ever. Highest ever. You know, I'm going to take this to our guests who have joined us. Sudin Sabnis, we have the maximum number of taxpayers as of today paying the maximum amount of tax again, because that is tax on their income, tax on their investments, tax on things that they like buying and spending money on. There's just too much tax that's just being paid by the salaried class, to be specific, the middle class in this country, to be specific. Do you think there's a case for a rationalization as far as the new tax regime itself is concerned? And more importantly, did the new tax regime, which the finance minister brought about, saying the fact that this will actually end up giving you more cash in hand, did it do that?
So yes, do agree with you. See, in a sense, as you started with the consumption, that's something which I believe is the key. Of course, more money in the hands of the people. Rate rationalization is something which definitely is the key as well over here. Especially if you see that the GDP growth, what is taking place in the last year at around 8.2%. The consumption growth though was not that high, right? And now considering the geopolitical situation, this is something which I believe is a major talk, that this is something what has to increase when it comes to the internal consumption. So the consumption within India, that means obviously giving more money in the hands of the people. Now the thing is, when you're talking of the new tax regime, yes. As in fact my colleague also pointed out, this is something which is perhaps got a lot of confusion, right? What do I opt for, a new or a old tax regime? What is more beneficial for me, etc. See, the thing is whether there is something which is really gone a lot into the hands of the taxpayers, may or may not be, depending on where, in which slab you actually are. There are 6 slabs per se. What that is, and at the end of the day, you do have the tax rate going up from 5% to 30%, so a 6 times increase within the slab of your 6 lakhs, which is your first slab, which is ends to directly to 15 lakhs, right? So there's a massive increase of around 6 times. Now, at the end of the day, whether you are really getting a big relief as compared to the old tax regime may not really be as significant, especially considering the inflation, considering the expenses. For example, the salary taxpayer is something someone who obviously is the most taxed, obviously, because you do have TDS on a monthly basis. Come to think of it, whether he's getting see, India is again not a country which has a great social security system. Means that you need to have insurance for instance, which is compulsory, be it health insurance or life insurance. Education expenses are something which are not say owned by the state. You again have to kind of incur that on your own. So there are certain expenses which are a prerequisite, which anyone really has to have. Now compare that with for example an old tax regime, wherein you at least had some kind of deductions. You had deduction on housing, you did have on your principal interest, principal as well as interest. You did have deductions when it came to your insurance, etc. All these things have been done away with. So yes, there definitely is a case to simplify the tax slabs as a first point, to in fact have, if not all kinds of deductions, some select deductions, right? As I said, when it comes to insurance, when it comes to your health or your education insurance, education fees, for instance, all these are something which definitely are called for.
Richa, I'm going to come to you on this. That is the reason why you have still so many people choosing the old tax regime, because those deductions make a huge amount of difference in terms of the amount of cash that you have in your hand.
Absolutely. And but I would say that the anticipation of the individual taxpayers is also justified this time to some extent, I would say, considering the numbers, the direct tax collections that we've been seeing so far. Coupled with the fact that there have been reduction in the corporate tax rates, like one would argue that obviously the corporate tax collections are much more. But however, the in general anticipation is that these rates have gone down. Then again, there is this inflation rates which have been increasing. So it's been quite some time since these slabs have been revised. So there is definitely an anticipation that these should be considered this time, and some tweaking in the slab rates or the slabs itself should be done. Now the question comes up is, should the new tax regime also have more deductions introduced? I think to my mind that may not happen, because that was how why it was introduced, because it was simpler, both maybe from a person who's filing, even from the employer perspective. So I think even what that can be done, what is being anticipated by the taxpayers can still be done by just increasing the slab rates and by changing the slab rates, lowering them down and increasing the slabs. There may not be any further deductions that may come in the new regime. But yes, there is a lot of anticipation this time around.
Oh, absolutely. Karthik, the word to look out for here, the key word, so to speak, is inflation. Look at the cost of everything, specifically speaking food inflation, which the RBI itself has admitted to the fact that it cannot control food inflation. And that's the one thing everybody buys. There is no control over the cost of vegetables, pulses, all those daily essentials that are required to keep human beings alive. The food inflation is uncontrollable at this stage, and it has been going up significantly.
You're right. So, inflation is definitely eating into the disposable cash available with citizens, especially with tax-paying citizens. But again, what can the fiscal policy or the monetary policy really do about food inflation? Unfortunately, we are still so heavily dependent on monsoon for all our food grains and for all the food production that happens in the country, that if there is a good monsoon, you will have better crop yield and hence you will have lower prices. But if monsoon decides to play spoiled sport, you're actually left with absolutely no recourse. So, you will have to live with that demand-supply mismatch where supply is short, demand is high, and hence prices go up. So, there are some levers available with the finance minister, and I think, now that elections are over and now that there is no real ulterior motive for the government to distribute free ration, while that has been accommodated for another 5 years. Now, the point is maybe this time around some fiscal prudence on the kind of, discretionary spending which the government has done in the past, perhaps in a bid to get more votes in favor of the ruling government. At least those expenses should be done away with, and maybe, not everything in one go. In fact, look at the policy measures which have been announced in the first 15, 20 days. In fact, not even that, in the first 10, 11 days of the new government taking oath. You have the PM Kisan, a 20,000 crore rupee dole already meted out in PM Kisan this time around. So, these kind of expenses, maybe the budget should try and address that. Maybe beyond a point, you've got to make people self-reliant, self-sufficient. You've got to, inflation is not something you can do, job creation is something you can do. And with job creation, maybe if you're incentivizing through PLI, through other schemes, if you incentivize the corporate sector by way of direct taxes again to invest more and create more employment, then the pressure of inflation and inflation eating into all your earnings is something that can be tackled. But again, these are long-term solutions. It's not that you give a tax relief today and within the financial year you will have new factories, new industries coming up and new employment getting generated. But over time, I think budget will have to look at a long-term horizon and not take a very short-sighted view of what can we do immediately. I think what can be done immediately, I believe, is like our co-panelists were also saying, perhaps look at more number of slabs and make these interim, tax cuts within those existing slabs right now. That way, at least a certain section of society which is more subjected to food inflation gets more money in their hands. If Finance Minister is able to do that, then at least there is some relief for those who are actually grappling with high inflation.
Right, that is as far as food inflation is concerned. Sudin Sabnis, the problem here is that what about the things apart from food which have this big GST on them? Literally everything seems like a sin tax. You go to a salon, you pay sin tax. You buy a car, you pay sin tax. All those things. If you want more cars to be sold in this country, then either one way or the other, you bring the GST down or you bring the income tax down.
I do agree. I mean, if say you buy Maruti 800 or you buy a Mercedes, I mean, in any case, you are under 28%, obviously increasing by the surcharge. So yes, that's something which definitely has to be the key. See, I do completely agree. I mean, at the end of the day, it all boils down to two things. One is the inflation, and secondly, the disposable income. We though perhaps might be required to be a little bit more pragmatic, perhaps, see, because this is the first budget. There is a coalition government in place this time. This is not something which is like what was there in the last 10 years. So yes, perhaps this is something what the government might be a little bit more pragmatic as well, might be a little bit more socialistic to kind of agree to kind of reduce the burden to some extent, at least for certain taxpayers, not perhaps for all. But the main areas which were there during all this election campaign were also revolved around your jobs as well as your unemployment. This is something which definitely needs to be tackled. There are a few kind of deductions what are available under income tax. This is something what needs to be revamped, right? So there is a section, for example, ETJJAA. That's something which definitely calls for a revamp. So this is when it comes to providing more employment, employment generation to a particular category of people. But this is something which calls for a revamp. Startups are something which are also currently reeling from a lot of perspectives. So again, they also need to be kind of taken care of as well, especially from because there was a funding winter, right, for a long time. That's something which also needs to be taken care of as well. So yes, whatever measures, be it under GST or be it under various other levies. You for example, you want to purchase a property, the stamp duty regime, for example, is pretty high as well, right? So
Yeah.
all these factors needs to be taken into account. Whatever comes in the purview of the finance minister. I'm sure this is something what we'll see step by step over a period, but not immediately at least at this point of time.
But what can be done immediately, Richa? Let me bring that to you. What can be done realistically, immediately? Because as Karthik is pointing out, there is that fiscal deficit target, there's fiscal prudence, which India is now known for keeping up with it. But fact of the matter is that while you keep up with that, there are people over here, suffering because, because the job market is not what it used to be, and things cost way more. I mean, everything we've seen, prices of everything from rentals to houses. Buying houses go up by 20 to 30% over the course of the last couple of years.
So yeah, these are things that pinch an aam aadmi, I would say, at a very ground and a practical level. See, as far as housing is concerned, the interest deduction continues to be what it has been for several years, whereas the cost of housing has increased manifold. Then you have your deductions in the case of ATC. There are all these sort of deductions, all these kind of investments all put together under one common ceiling, which is that 1.5 lakh. That is again something which needs to be considered. And I think, as one of the other panelists pointed out today, there is a need for social security as well. The recent changes that have come about in the past couple of years, taxing some bit of the social security provisions also that the individual is doing for themselves. I think that is again something that one needs to look at. Today, with the demographic position of India, we have a lot of working population, but this is going to change soon. We do not have a social security system as such for India, which can take care of the large aging population in several years. So today, if somebody wants to really take care of their autumn years by providing for their retirement benefits, these are some things that do weigh heavily on the mind of an individual taxpayer, which is something that needs to be considered. And what exactly is the definition of a lower income or a salaried class or of the middle income group, considering the inflation today? That's again that needs to be considered. What exactly do you mean by, is 15 lakh enough for a family of 4? Those are things that have to be kept in mind. So to my mind, there is a big case for this particular class, at least, which is contributing quite a bit to the exchequer.
Karthik, fact of the matter is that, again, let me bring this back to where we began. We discuss this all the time, but, realistically speaking, even if not a massive cut in income tax rate. Now, some are asking for a good 50% drop in income tax rate. Well, let's put it out over here. That's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. So don't even expect that. Realistically speaking, at this stage, with all the chatter that you've been hearing, what can be done? What is the level of reduction in income tax that one can even expect or look forward to?
So, Krishna, I think before I answer that, and that's, honestly, I think there are far more experienced people sitting in the finance ministry, than I would be able to venture a guess into what realistically can be done. I think they'll know better and hopefully they will act on that better knowledge. But I think the problem really is...
But a cut is possible.
I think a cut is possible. I think, increasing the number of slabs and having those smaller brackets, because 15 lakh rupees in 2020 could buy you a lot more than 15 lakh rupees can buy you in 2024. And look at the cycles of inflation that we have gone through and the fact that you are in a high interest rate regime. So anybody who wants to buy a house or wants to buy a car or wants to buy any white good on which a loan would be required, that loan is more expensive.
Yeah.
And you're paying a high tax for something which has already become expensive, and then you're paying a higher EMI also on top of that. Okay. So for the entire consumption story to take off, you will have to look at rationalizing taxes at some level. But I think the bigger challenge, and this is something that Richa also just mentioned, I want to refer back to a Times of India editorial I read a couple of days back, which said that India is going to get older before it gets richer. And I think there is a very, very potent thought in that, because you will not have this demographic advantage forever. There are more and more people who are heading towards retirement or early retirement because the job market is bad. So at some point, you will have to put all your efforts and focus all your energies on ensuring that wealth creation in this country is supported by policies that the finance ministry comes out with. And what could these policies really be? I think one thing which is really setting us back right now is the story that came out, I think, just yesterday, that let's say in the stock markets, the F&O segment is likely to be subjected to speculation tax of 30%, pretty much in line with cryptocurrency. So for those who want to take that risk and plunge into the F&O segment and make money using the stock market as an instrument, you should not really look at subjecting them to a speculative tax of 30%. So I think, these policies which detest people or sort of, don't let people grow and live up to their aspirations, need to be thought through very, very clearly.
The aspirations of the people of India have to be thought through thoroughly. That's very important as we look ahead to the budget 2024-25. I'm afraid we're completely run out of time over here. I'm going to thank Sudin Sabnis, Partner, Direct Tax, Laxmikumaran and Sridharan for joining us. Thank you, Sudin, for being with us. And of course, thank you, Richa, Sawhney, Chartered Accountant, Walker, Chandiok Co Llp for being with us. Of course, thank you, Karthik Malhotra, for being with us as well. And with that, it's a wrap here from my side. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishnakumar signing off.